welcome to episode 1 of the new series called Sunday's Tips. Today's tip is going to be what I believe is the biggest nightmare for a crocheter, and that's called with how many chains to start my project. Now, it's very important before you start whatever project you want to make that you always want to make a sample with the yarn, the crochet hook, and the stitch that you're going to use. So let's start with the yarn and the crochet hook. Let's say that we have a medium weight yarn and the label states that we can use a 4 to a 5mm crochet hook. Now let's say that you're going to make a sample of 10 double crochet. Now those 10 double crochet starting from the 4mm crochet hook going up sizes on your crochet hook, you're going to realize that your sample has started to get wider and the stitches are getting taller as well. Now, so it's very important that with the crochet hook that you're going to make your sample, that's the size of the crochet hook that you're going to use on your project. Now let's continue with the stitch. Let's say, for example, that I made a blanket using the bobble stitch and I started with 100 chains to give me 80 centimeters width on the blanket. This doesn't mean that if you change a stitch and you start with 100 chains again, so let's say that now I want to make a new blanket using the chevron stitch. So if I start with 100 chains on this stitch, I will realize that as I go through the rows, the blanket is going to start getting narrower due to the zigzags that the stitch makes. So it's very important to make a sample of the stitch that you're going to use as well. Now, another factor that plays a big role on how you're going to make your project, on the sample that you're going to make, is the strength that you use as you crochet. So some of us crochet tighter and some of us crochet looser. So if I get 10 different people and I give them the same yarn and the same hook size and I tell them to crochet 10 rows of 10 double crochet, I will get 10 different samples because each one of us crochets differently. So when you make a sample, write down on a piece of paper the stitch that you used, the crochet hook, the yarn, and mention under there if you were crocheting loose or tight, or try to write down some information on how what's the strength that you were using on your sample. So a process that will take about 5 to 10 minutes to make a sample will save us a lot of hours of frogging, because I've seen people that they've made a big blanket and in the end they frogged it all because it wasn't the total measurements that they wanted to. So make sure that you always make a sample before you start. So for all the reasons that I just mentioned, it's incorrect to ask somebody with how many chains they started with for their own project. So if you see somebody that they've made a jacket and you ask how many chains you started with and for what age it is, and they say that I started with 50 chains and it's for a 2-year-old. So you're gonna start with 50 chains, but you don't know the crochet hook that they used or the yarn that they used. So you'll realize that the project that you made is either bigger or smaller than what you wanted. So always make your own sample with your own yarn to make sure with how many chains you need to start your work with. So today's useful tip is always make a sample with the yarn, the crochet hook, and the stitch that you want to use on your project. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.